Hi everybody, welcome to class. As you continue on your coursework and some of the classes in our program, if you do online courses, you're going to see that I take the time to video record every single lesson that I teach for each of my classes. The reason I do this is so that you have access to lectures in addition to what's in the textbook. This is my first lecture that you'll be seeing for this class. We're going to follow the textbook in a very linear fashion. If you had me for any of the other education classes that I've taught online, you'll know that I tend to jump around a lot and add in additional supplemental articles and things like that. Not going to be the case for this class. The book that we're using for Guidance of Young Children by Marion, it's probably the leading textbook on the market in any early childhood program. You're going to find this book in every program across the United States, in Canada, even in Europe too. So everything that we cover in here, page to page, is relevant. Other online courses that I've done and I've taught and I've developed for our college, I jump around a lot. I'll pick chapters, I'll add supplemental articles. We're doing this cover to cover. So what I've tried to do, I've tried to supplement the textbook with additional stuff that I think is relevant that can further expand on the ideas. Your way to be successful in this course, in my opinion, is to have the PowerPoints in front of you, go through them as I'm lecturing. Some of the times I'm going to ask you to read what's on the slides as well. And that's going to help you, and it's going to be the most effective way to attack and approach this class. So the first half of this class is really going to focus on what guidance does to young children. One of the things that you're going to constantly come back to that's a big idea in this entire class is that the teacher really has significant influence over the lives of children. But I want to note that if you've already had EDUC 102, Observation and Guidance, there's a lot of the same in this class, and I think that matters, and I think that's important because you want to be able to see similar situations that you do in another class because that'll create continuity more than anything else. So when I think it's important, I'll give you the objectives. You can look at these and read these on your own in the PowerPoint, and I'll give you a minute to do so. So also being presented are some scenarios. These are similar to what's in the book. I want you to take some time, read them, and talk about each of the reactions to them. So take about a minute, and I'll time it, and you can read and look at the first scenario. So I think the key here, and obviously, I read the scenario in the book, and the first thing I thought about was, this sounds like something Eric Cartman would do to his mother in South Park, but it's a good example, and it's something to see, and the point of this really is to show you that if there's a different message being sent between the parent and the child, and then a teacher tries to send a different message to the child, there's going to be resentment on the part of one party or the other. Also, children are very instinctual and they're smart and they know how to work their parent and they know how to work the provider, the child care provider as well. So that's one of the messages that was coming across here that I want you to keep in mind. So let's take a look at the next scenario, and I'll give you a minute to read this one as well. So in this example, the point of this one is trying to show you that when a child learns at a really young age that they can get away what they want and they can make the decisions and they're not corrected early, they're going to continue doing what they want to do the older they get. And you know, the book is going to present this to you in many different ways and many different lights, but I can tell you from personal experience, once a child hits about age 8, 9, 10, and they're in 3rd and 4th grade, behaviors like this are nearly impossible to correct. So that early enforcement has to be done to really allow the behaviors to reset themselves. So one more scenario for you. And this one will be a little longer, so I'll give you a few minutes on it. So obviously, this is a challenging scenario because if you're watching this and you're enrolled in an education class, you will learn that hitting a child is never, ever, ever the answer. But children are very likely to copy what their parents or their caregiver does. And that's the takeaway message from this, and you have to keep that in mind. What a child sees at the home, they're likely to translate that to an early childhood environment. So one last scenario, and then we will move on to some of the more pressing content in this course. So this scenario shows you a classic example of what redirection looks like. I think this is great. What was done here is certainly appropriate because it shows you ways that a caregiver can be responsive to the needs of the child, and they can also redirect, and redirect is a good thing with children. So now we're going to get into, we've had a chance to look and read some of the scenarios, we're going to get into some of the content in the class. So when you hear me say big idea, it's something that I really want you to note, because that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see on the test, you're going to see throughout the papers. If you're referring to the big ideas in this course, it's going to help advance you and you're going to do well. Our textbook is going to talk about 2 dimensions of caregiving, this from chapter 1 to chapter 13. They're going to talk about responsiveness and demandingness. Responsiveness is whether an adult meets the child's needs and understands what child development is supposed to look like. Demandingness is how the person sets limits and monitors, supervises, and faces issues. I want you to know this because most people sitting in a room will say, well, it's important and a teacher has to be both. A teacher doesn't have to be both to be an effective teacher. A teacher can be effective and be demanding, and that happens all of the time. Teachers can set limits, they can monitor, supervise, but they don't have to be responsive, and they can still be an effective teacher. Now you might be thinking, well, that's probably a horrible teacher. It is a horrible teacher, but they can still be effective and they can get the curriculum across. they don't have to be responsive, but they can't be only responsive and not be demanding. Because if a teacher can't set limits and they can't monitor and they can't supervise, no learning will occur. This is why when you're working with early childhood and child development, they teach you how to, how to handle this demandingness element first. But I think it's equally important to be responsive as well. But you can be an effective teacher and not be responsive. But you can't be an effective teacher and not be demanding. So that's a big idea, and I want you to think about that throughout the course. So, responsiveness differs between adult and adult. Some adults are going to use techniques that are going to make kids feel good about themselves. Some adults aren't going to. Children pick up on this very easily. My goal in this class and any of the other child development classes that you take is to show you that there's different levels of responsiveness. Different adults think differently on this. There are different elements of classroom management that you have to find the style that best suits you. But I think it's important that you see that developmental needs are different for children depending on their age. You're taking a course that's really looking at kids between 0 to 8, but I want you to think of this class as 0 to 4th grade, because if we're talking early childhood, let's go according to kind of what the United States has set as our standards is birth to grade 4. So you're going to handle responsiveness different for children, and I want you to keep that in mind. Now, demandingness, on the other hand, we'll go into that in depth, and we'll look at that element and how that applies. But before we get there, you can talk about warmth a little bit. This is something when you do your observations for observation and guidance. If you've already had the class, great. But if you haven't, when I do that class, I always ask the question, was that teacher warm? Was that teacher sincere? You can fake sincerity all the time, and teachers are very good at it. Some of them are at the point of their career where they don't want to teach anymore. So try to think of ways that you can look for genuine care from teacher to parent, teacher to student, and I think that's important. So our textbook gives us 3 examples of warmth. It'll give you some ideas on it, and same deal. There's a lot of examples in this text, so I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to read and look over them, and then we'll chat about them. And obviously, this is not meant to be this is not meant to be a knock on different kinds of gender. But one of the things that you're going to find is that males have a harder time expressing warmth to children than females do. It's just a natural thing. In this example, the male is not good at expressing emotion, but when they can show the child that they have, it can create a positive relationship between the caregiver and the child. So that's obviously something to keep in mind. In this example, you have a mother who shows unrestrained warmth, and you're going to find that to an extreme as well. And this is also a very good thing. Children like routines. You'll see that in terms of when we talk about classroom management here. Supplying children with routines is always a really, really, really good thing if you're able to do that. One of the things here, this is an example of a mother that has the same closing every single day that she tells the child, and that can be a good thing as well. So understanding, too, the importance of having a morning meeting and a morning message is huge in early childhood education. Any child care centers, any classrooms. If I was coming in as a principal and I wanted to see somebody that knew what they were doing, I would be looking for a morning message and I would be looking for circle time in the morning. This is a good way to show children consistency and routine. And once again, I think this is a very appropriate approach as well for an early childhood classroom. So one of the things that we're going to look at throughout this book is this idea of, does a teacher or an early learning center supervisor understand important theories of child development? As I told you about myself in the introductory video, I'm on 15 plus years in education. I was very fortunate to start teaching when I was 19 in a regular school district in Baldwin-Whitehall, and moved myself up through the college ranks. But in that time, I worked in elementary schools, I worked at the high school, I worked as a technology coordinator, I've done a lot of consulting work. But what I come back to that I consistently say is that understanding theory and theorists is more important at this age level than it ever could be at the high school level. You're going to see so much stress on your PECT exams if you're going for early childhood certification. The importance of theory and theorists in education. You have to be able to take scenarios and apply them so that children can understand what you're doing as a teacher, and having that knowledge of child development is huge. Do we talk about that much in this class? No. We talk about decision-making processes. We're going to do it's going to be about an hour-long lecture. Chapter 2 is very, very long, and that's one that I would suggest splitting up, but I'm going to really go over theory and theorists. But when you take observation and guidance, health and safety, curriculum design and development, we're really going to stress these theories in this class. But this will give you a foundation when you're going into those classes. But understanding theory and theorists is very, very, very important. So adults that understand child development understand that they are creating an environment where there should be partners and interaction. And basically what I want you to think about here, and this is another big idea, good teachers give kids input on what's going on, meaning that children have the ability to make decisions. Even if they're small decisions to you as a teacher, giving a child choice will really help them. And that's going to help work in schools. And when children have that ability to have input and interaction, it's going to facilitate and help in the learning process as well. So good teachers understand that there are different ways of communication towards young children. What you say to a first grader is much different than what you say to a fourth grader. What you say to a 2- and 3-year-old is much different than what you say to a second or third grader. You have to understand what the child is capable of doing, and you also have to understand their age level as well. And if you can't do that, we're going to have similar problems as well in your interactions. It's why one of the big projects for this class is understanding the difference between 2 classroom management plans, one at the really early age level and one at the higher level as well. And I'm really going to want you to explain that and show me different ways to communicate with children of different ages. So another big idea here is this third bullet down.